May I ask you a controversial question?
Of course.
Are you ready for that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't go into too much detail, but obviously every organization, politics is politics.
Did you expect this question?
I didn't expect it, but I'm happy to answer it.
You faced allegations that were later dismissed. Councillor, what inspired you to enter public service, and how have your personal experience shaped your approach to leadership?
Okay. It was by accident. I had no intention of coming into politics. My family has always been historically, certainly my dad, he was a migrant to this country, in the 60s. He was a trade unionist, a loyal kind of Labour Party supporter. So always been kind of supporters of the Labour Party, always voted for them since the age of 18. But I was I studied applied chemistry. I then enrolled onto kind of a postgraduate course at the University of Salford, and the idea was to go into the chemical industry. You plan things, but sometimes those plans, I'm a Muslim, and obviously Allah is the best planner. Those plans don't go to according to what you had planned. My father fell ill. He became a stroke patient. So eventually, as a family, we had to make a decision to go into self-employment, leave kind of employment, self-employment, where we could actually look after him at home and also have some income coming in to the family as well. I was self-employed for about 10 years, between the mid-90s to the mid kind of noughties at 2005. And then my kids were getting older, so I was based in Warrington. I decided to kind of come back to Manchester, work as in a youth centre as a manager, a part-time manager. And when you've been self-employed, you do about 80, 90 hours a week, if not more, right? But 16 hours left me a lot of time. So I did started doing a lot of voluntary work. That work involved whether it was litter picking, whether it was becoming a member of the local school governing body, getting involved kind of into faith work, and the Labour Party, because Labour Party is traditionally voluntary work. You go out and you campaign, knock on doors, you ask people about the issues they have and whether they would support you in the local elections. So I started working for my local Labour Party.
Did you choose the Labour Party?
Like I said, I was a Labour Party member. Traditional Labour Party, because my father, he came in the 60s. He worked in the textile industry. He joined a trade union. And obviously the trade unions are an integral part of the labour movement. And so the Labour Party was the party for our family. And actually traditionally, for working class families and for immigrant families, the Labour Party was the party. So it's something that was passed on from one generation to the next. And in Manchester, obviously, I joined the local Labour Party branch, started campaigning for them. And in 2009, I was given the opportunity to stand for election in Rusholme Ward. It was the third least winnable seat at that time because Labour lost the general election in 2010 to the coalition government, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. There was quite a momentum behind the Lib Dems. A lot of students in my ward, which were Clegmania, was the thing. And this is where I think sometimes luck plays a part. Because of all the voluntary work I'd done in the previous 3-4 years, once I sold my business, I had done it for the right reasons. I hadn't done it to gain any votes. So when it came to the election, those people said, oh, I know him. He's done the litter pink. Oh, I know him. He's a governor of my school. Oh, I know him. He works with the local mosque, with the local church. So I built a bit of a goodwill. So against the national trend, I actually won a seat from the Lib Dems in 2010. So that's how I came to politics. And now this is my 15th year. And I'm enjoying it.
So, are you happy the Labour Party in the power now?
Absolutely. We presented a budget last Friday. This is probably the most important thing a city council has to do, is set a balanced budget. This was the first budget certainly since I'd been elected, which was under a Labour government. And last year we were, after 14 years of austerity, where Manchester has been disproportionately impacted in terms of the funding that's been taken away from us. Nearly £500 million cut from our funding. Unfair because it was based on kind of outdated metrics. It was disproportional, not based on need. We had a rising population that wasn't taken into account. And so the best local government settlement we've had since 2009 was delivered by this Labour government. And so we've been able to set a balanced budget. We're still under kind of financial pressures like councils up and down the country, but the improved funding has enabled us to kind of set a budget without having to cut services, protect those frontline services, and a budget that looks ahead with optimism. So yes, absolutely delighted that we had a Labour government.
Good. Can you share a memorable experience from your times as a governor at Birchfield's primary school that influenced your views on education and community involvement?
Okay, I live in Longside. Longside is by all metrics, it's a ward that is socially, economically deprived, very densely populated. A larger percentage of the population are from ethnic minority background, predominantly South Asian, but that's changed over the last 20 years. It used to be more kind of Irish community and Pakistani community, but now there's a lot of kind of a Bangladeshi community, a lot of communities from kind of the Middle East, Somalian community, African communities, but it still is deprived on money metrics. People work hard, but a lot of them work in kind of low-paid jobs, the low, the gig economy, the nighttime economy, the retail hospitality economy, which is not, very well paid. Yeah, and over the last 14 years, those communities have suffered because clearly they felt the pinch, and then obviously the cost of living crisis has impacted as well. Yeah, and this came towards the end of the austerity years. But there's a community with high aspirations for their children to do well. All my children went to Birchfield's primary school. So I joined the primary school where my children went. And when I joined the governing body, I joined as a parent governor. And the first thing that shocked me was that some of the aspiration of the young children, especially the young girls, years 5 and 6, just before they go into secondary school, they wanted to be housewives, housemakers. Now, nothing wrong with that. My mother was a housemaker, and she never worked, and it's a thankless job bringing up a family. But I felt that they needed to be more kind of aspirational into what they wanted with their future, right? So that motivated me to actually improve the aspirations of the community that I live in. And Birchfields is a community school. So the community is the school and the school is the community. It's that's the nature of that relationship. And the moment that really kind of I was so pleased about when I was governor was when we recruited a new head teacher, and within about a couple of years, the head teacher, and by that time I was chair of the governing body, rang me and she said, "I'm absolutely delighted, Rabnawaz. I've just had a complaint from a parent." And I said, "You're delighted because you had a complaint?" And she said, "Yes, because the complaint was, why aren't you setting my child more homework?" He goes, "Because previously the complaints were about the food's cold, minor issues, not relevant to actually the curriculum or what we teach. So the first time some parents come in and said, 'Can you please send my child more homework, set my child more homework in the evening?' And for me, that was a shift. That was a shift in terms of the community. It was also a shift in terms of the perceptions of what these children can achieve. When I hired that head teacher, one of the reasons I hired her was she said that 95% plus of the children that come to the school, English is an additional language. For me, that should not be a barrier. They should be able to achieve the top grades, achieve what they want. And that English as an additional language, because their family's first language is not English, should not be a barrier for them to achieving that. So I think that, for me, that was important because I wanted to raise the aspirations within the community that these children can have the good paid jobs that we were kind of attracting into Manchester, the investment that was attracting to Manchester. They could fulfill their potential and give them that empowerment to do so, both boys and girls. And that is certainly important for Manchester. And for me, if somebody said to me, my one achievement at Birchfields, it was to kind of enable, facilitate, champion that shift. And now, really proud that Birchfields is doing well. But also those kids, some of those kids now, I mean, I became a governor in 2003, 2004. I've seen them kids grow up, go into further education, higher education, get good qualifications, get good jobs, and ultimately that is one way, surefire way of moving out of poverty. Because I have families living in 3-4 generations living in the same household because they can't get on the housing ladder, they can't afford the rents because the incomes are so low. The barriers of getting a house or even getting on the rent, your foot on the renting ladder is difficult. But if you're earning a good income, you can do that. You can move out and buy your own place. And all the kind of the investment in terms of the city centre, people talk about that, the high-rise blocks and the city centre kind of living, they can afford it. And suddenly a whole world opens up to them. But it all starts with a good education, yeah, and giving the people the opportunity to do what they want. And it's not always necessarily academic achievement, because not every child is suited for academia. But as long as they can achieve their full potential, that is the key, and that is what the ambition should be, and has been when I was in the governing body. Because my 5 children, they've done really well. They've achieved really well. 4 are working. Youngest is still studying at university, but it's been given that opportunity. That's important.
Councillor, may I ask you a controversial question?
Of course.
Are you ready for that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 2021,
Yeah.
you faced allegations that were later dismissed.
Okay. Yeah.
How did you navigate this challenging period, and what did you learn from the experience? Would you take us through it, please?
I mean, look.
Did you expect this question?
I didn't expect it, but I'm happy to answer it.
Good.
It was to do with, I suppose you could say, internal kind of politics.
What happened?
I can't go into too much detail, but obviously every organization, politics is politics. I came into politics to improve the lives of the people of Manchester and the people of Rusholme, the ward I represent, yeah? All people. There are rivalries in kind of all sectors, including politics. And I think it was an episode that was probably, I wasn't kind of expecting, but I managed through it because I had the support of my family and friends. But ultimately, my comrades within the Labour Party who knew this was nonsense. But because of my role, obviously, it had to be investigated.
So, Councillor, I know what was that,
Yeah.
but I just want you to tell us, what was that exactly?
It was a malicious allegation. It was a malicious allegation.
What was that?
It was a malicious allegation that was made that I had kind of made some comments, derogatory comments to somebody.
What kind of comment?
Who kind of I'd met. It was about their physical appearance and some homophobic comments, yeah.
Did you put that comment intentionally?
No, I wasn't even there.
All right.
So this was a totally false allegation.
Okay.
I mean, when the comments were supposed to be made, I wasn't even there. I didn't even utter them words. But the thing is,
where that comment is coming from?
Well, anybody can make a comment. I mean, me and you sat here now. This is being recorded, I assume. But if there wasn't, you can go away from here and say, well, actually, Councillor Akbar said this to me during the interview.
So how come they realize it's your fault?
Well, no. I mean, if once an allegation is made, it has to be investigated.
Mm-hmm.
And because making comments that are derogatory or homophobic or any type of comments that are prejudicial or discriminatory, as a senior councillor, you can't do that. So what happens is the party then does a neutral act which suspends you, and the police investigated it. The investigation didn't take very long. I think it was about 2-3 weeks. And at the end of it, they concluded that there was no case to answer. And that was it. And then after that, the suspension was lifted, and that's it. But it's part, and unfortunately, over the last few years, I think over the last decade or so, I think some of the stuff on social media, it's kind of blurred some of the kind of narrative, and politicians have to be careful in terms of what they say, how they're interpreted, and obviously.
Are you active on social media?
I'm very active on social media. Yeah,
You support it?
supporter of
Social media?
social media. Social media's look. Social media's, I think, been a good thing. But I think over the last few years, it's become certainly, or what was formerly Twitter and now X, has become a bit of a cesspit. I think it's the some of the narrative and the rhetoric on there, you wouldn't get away with in kind of out there on the street. Some of the language that is used, the people behind kind of accounts, which God knows where they are based, who they are, nobody knows. And I think what's that done is that's in terms of lowered the bar in terms of what's accepted in society. And I think there needs to be it needs to be regulated. But clearly it's that there is positives to it, because it means that politicians are more transparent, can be more accountable. I have no issue with that, because I think ultimately it's a democracy, and as a politician you should be out there, you should be held accountable, you should be transparent. It gives us an opportunity to let the public know what we're doing, what activities we get up to, what good we're doing, what our views are. You couldn't do that before. Emails are fine and telephones are fine and meetings are fine, but social media, instantly you can let thousands or millions of people know what you're doing, which is a good thing.
Some countries are banning it for the children under 16 years old.
Yeah.
You're happy with that? You agree with that? So
Agree with
banning social media for the 16 years old, or banning phones at school to check social media at school.
I mean, look,
or even after that.
We live in
some restrictions.
We live in a free liberal democracy, and I think there has to be a case of common sense that has to be applied in terms of schools. Schools have policies in terms of when pupils can have mobile phones and when they can use them or not.
Are you happy the way they use it now?
I think.
I mean, the 16 years
you
old.
can't generalize it. You can't generalize it. I'm sure that there is kind of more kind of incidents of online bullying that happens, especially with young people. Definitely, it needs to be regulated. But I'm not in favor of banning, because whenever you ban something, what you do is you drive it underground, right? So you don't really eradicate it. You're actually making it go away somewhere in a dark space where you do not know what's happening and you have no control. So I certainly in a free liberal democracy, I'm not in favor of banning social media, but certainly needs to be regulated.
Councillor, as a Muslim person, do you support LGBTQ community?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the reason why I don't know why you look surprised at that answer. Look,
you don't look surprised.
Yeah. We have the Equality Act in this country, 2010. There are 9 protected characteristics. As an elected representative, yes, you said I'm a Muslim, but I'm an elected representative who happens to be South Asian origin, because my parents from there. I happen to be a representative who is of Muslim faith. I happen to be a representative who's male. I happen to be a representative who I am heterosexual. I am not the other way around. I am not a Muslim representative. I am not a South Asian representative. I am not a male representative. Because at the end of the day, my role is to represent everybody. And Manchester is one of the most diverse cities in the country. And that is our strength. We have, as I said to you, I think earlier on before we started this interview, at the last census, 43% of our population is ethnic minority at the last census, and that is growing. We have a large kind of LGBTQ plus community in Manchester. Manchester was one of the cities that stood up for their rights. We have the second largest Jewish community in Greater Manchester outside Greater London. So this diversity is our strength, but our job is to make sure that everybody gets on with each other in a cohesive manner. Because if we do that, then we can continue to attract the investment and jobs into this city, so people can continue to prosper and live happily. And we have a zero tolerance towards hate. Hate incidents and hate crime. There's an absolute zero tolerance, and we will not allow that. Which is why when you talked to me earlier on about that allegation, because that allegation involved one of the protected characteristics, it was a reason why it needed to be investigated. It does not matter who you are, whether you can be the leader of the council or an executive member or an MP. If an allegation has to be made, it has to be properly investigated to show that there is zero tolerance in the city. And that's why I was absolutely right that there should be an investigation. I did not argue for that investigation not to go ahead, right? So, yes, your faith is, we have a strong interfaith network in the city. We have strong kind of links where the faith communities are kind of, allowed to kind of practice what they want. For example, to give you an example, here in the City Council, our coroner is, Her Majesty's coroner, works 7 days a week, right? Because we know that Muslim and Jewish families want their deceased to be buried as quickly as possible, right? And we have made those arrangements. We will promote halal and kosher meat because that is the right of the Jewish and the Muslim communities, right? Just like it's the right of any community. You cannot, the thing with these equalities is, as a Muslim, I cannot say, I want to be protected from Islamophobia. I want my rights as be able to kind of practice my faith as I wish, but another protected characteristics, you can't. You just cannot do that. It just does not work. So I don't think my faith is compromised in that. Like I said, my role is to do what's right for the people of Rusholme and people of this city, whoever they are, whatever background they are, and I will always continue to do that.
As a director of MacFest,
Yeah.
what role do you believe cultural festivals play in promoting unity and understanding in diverse communities? Tell us a bit about MacFest. And how did you start, and what was your mission behind it?
Right. Basically, Kezra Shiraz, who's the director, the main founder, and who kind of came up with the idea of MacFest, the Muslim Art Culture Festival. Yeah, it was after the 2017 arena attack. As we know, 22 young people lost their lives. The perpetrator was of an Islamic faith. And immediately after that, there was a spike in Islamophobic hate incidents and hate crimes in the city. It was about ridiculous, something like 500%. So anybody out there who just were perceived to who visibly look like Muslim, and predominantly women, because those especially wearing a headscarf or a veil, were targeted all over the city in terms of especially public transport places. Kezra came up with the idea that we wanted to portray the positive side of Islam, and she wanted to kind of start a festival that would do that. Yeah, she came and saw me, and she was a friend of mine. We were together on the school governing body of Birchfield. She lived close nearby to me. I was happy to kind of join in this project because I thought it was a worthwhile project. But it also goes back to what I said earlier about diversity being our strength. In this city, we respect each other, but I think we moved away from the word tolerate, because tolerate means you have to put up with it. What we want to kind of promote in this city is celebrate our differences. We are different. There's nothing wrong with that. We are different. Let's celebrate our differences rather than tolerate. Right? Respect and celebrate. And so MacFest is about celebrating the Muslim art and culture, which unfortunately is not out there in the mainstream media. Over the last, certainly since 9/11, with the war on terror and the number of attacks that have happened, especially 7/7 and other attacks that have happened in this country and elsewhere, we have to accept that they've been carried out by people who claim to be of the Islamic faith, right? So the job of the, MacFest is just basically addressing some of them. That Islam is far more than just these people who claim to be Muslim and are carrying out acts which actually are against the religion of Islam anyway. And it's gone from success to success. I think it's the seventh year this year. It's now kind of a festival that actually not only is just local or regional or national, but international. The other kind of I suppose, a myth it debunked was that the Muslim community is not homogenous. We come from all different backgrounds, all over the world. We have different cultural practices. We may have one faith, but we have different cultural practices. We have different dress. We have different cuisine. We have different kind of languages, and that is what makes, you know, that tapestry makes the Muslim world so attractive. But somebody needs to do that, to show that, and I think MacFest has certainly done that, and quite successfully, because it's gained some awards, including the a national award from Her Majesty the Queen before she passed away.
The last question.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, what are your primary goals for the Rusholme Ward, and how do you plan to address emerging challenges?
Look, the challenges, as I said, I think we've obviously got a new government. The strengths are that we've got a diverse city, we've got a growing city, we've got a young population, we've got a city that is, despite the kind of monumental challenges we faced over the last few years, we've had Brexit, we've had the health crisis, we've had the Ukraine war, we've had the kind of the global conflicts around the Middle East. Our communities are on the whole cohesive, yeah? They get on with each other. We want to continue to attract investment into the city to create the jobs of the future sectors, where the tech sector, Manchester is the fastest growing tech city outside London. We are supposedly the most AI ready city in the UK after London. We want to create bring in the jobs of the future, but we want our citizens, our residents, our young people to have the skills and the qualifications to access them jobs. So for me, in terms of my kind of residents in Rusholme, those who I represent, I want them to be the young people to fulfill their opportunity. I want the new government to bring in kind of funding, more fairer funding, to make sure they address some of those systemic inequalities, especially health inequalities, which were exacerbated during COVID. Because what we found during COVID was those ethnic minority communities were kind of having the worst impact of COVID, because clearly they already had health inequalities, right? So public health monies to address that, and other funding to basically housing, massive housing crisis. We want people to be able to kind of want to build more houses. We're also already doing so. This year we've got 1,894 houses that are being built on site at the moment in 24-25, and those are going to be affordable to Manchester residents, whether it's a social rent, the Manchester living rent. Build more houses, which the central government has also kind of committed to doing so as well. They've got a target of 1.5 million over the next 5 years. That will help. In terms of, for us, is building back the basics, because over 14 years, don't forget, we've had to cut a lot of funding from neighborhoods. So our city has grown. So when your city grows, you expect your budgets to go up. Our budgets have gone down. So build back the basics in neighborhoods, make people proud of their neighborhoods, combat fly tipping, cleaner streets, better parks, and that will enable for this city to thrive and the communities to thrive. And obviously the jobs, we want well-paid jobs, and hopefully that will mean that those residents will be part of the success of Manchester, and I want Russian residents to be part of that, yeah? There's obviously challenges, because yes, we may be at the end of austerity with the change of government, but we don't know what's around the corner in terms of what happens globally. Nobody could have predicted the pandemic, the impact that had. Nobody could have predicted the first kind of war on mainland Europe since the Second World War, the impact that had in terms of the inflation and the cost of living. And we don't know what's around the corner, but our aim is to obviously do what's best for our residents. And we will deal with any challenges we face as they come along, and hopefully there won't be too many more monumental challenges, and we can have a bit of stability around the world. But I don't kind of have too much hope with the individual who's now the president across the Atlantic, because I think he's a bit volatile, and he does not know what from one day to the other what he's saying and what his direction is. So yes, we pray for stability around the world, peace around the world, and so we can focus on our residents here.
And we just saw that the example with the Ukrainian president.
Absolutely. That is no way. I mean, that is for any kind of leader of any country, but so-called the leader of the free world, to have that type of dialogue publicly. Behind closed doors, they can thrash out their disagreements, but publicly that should not have happened, because it's ultimately it's people are dying. People are dying in Ukraine, people are dying in other wars around the world, and we need to do this in a manner that's diplomatic, but not show people up as if it's some sort of, as I think he said, "Oh, this will make great TV." That was totally irresponsible. When you're talking about wars and people's lives being lost, and that shouldn't be about TV.
We can have a next interview on this, President Trump. How is that?
It's not somebody I really want to talk about, but
well, why not?
I look. It's up to the American people who they elect. Like I said, I think it's well above my pay grade. Certainly, my role is as a local councillor in Rusholme to kind of do what's right for the people of Rusholme, and in my role as exec member of finance for City of Manchester is to do what's right for the city in the circumstances.
Councillor, was a big pleasure for me.
Thank you very much.
So much.
No problem. Thank you very much.